So Becky, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a physician assistant, and I graduated in 2010. I studied at Rosalind Franklin University in Chicago because I'm originally from the States. And then I moved to Canada for love and started working in oncology and hematology in Owen Sound, Ontario, and then I transitioned to palliative care only in Brampton, Ontario. And after doing that for about 6.5 years, I had 2 children, and I felt my career shifting. And it is a good thing. Although it's a scary moment to feel things shift, it is ultimately really a very good thing. And I still work in oncology, but I do it as a medical writer. So I'm very much using my skill and knowledge as a physician assistant. In fact, I feel like it's integral to me getting the jobs that I do as a writer. And I just do it now from the writing aspect. So there's different forms of writing. There's one example would be the CME realm. And I do write some CMEs. It's really quite fun. I mean, you can read all the research and you're creating these surveys and a whole case scenario for people to continue learning off of. It's really fun, and it, of course, increases my knowledge at the same time. And within that aspect, I end up working with some really accomplished and notable leaders within the hematology and oncology realm. And those physicians I've learned quite a bit from. So that's one area of writing. I also do basically journalistic type writing, where I travel to different conferences around usually just North America, and I report on the new research that's been presented. So my articles go to typically global communications companies that put that out to different providers. I also do the same thing on a weekly basis following the research that has been released. And most of the time I am trying to do that with a Canadian focus. So I produce articles on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, that has an Canadian oncology focus, to really try to hopefully bring some awareness to the very outstanding work and effort that's being done in this country.
Amazing. And for those of us or people in the audience that don't know what CME is or what it stands for or how PAs interact with it, can you kind of explain what that is?
Well, continuing medical education, sometimes people call it CPD as well. And this is required of all physician assistants. We all need to complete a certain number of hours every single year to maintain our certification, as well as physicians and nurses. They all have to do this. And of course, it's because we need to keep up to date on our medical knowledge so that we are providing the best of care, at least the basic standard of care, and following the guidelines for our patients.
So how did you get into medical writing?
I was really looking for a career change. So I don't know if it changed, but I was looking for something different. I wanted something that wasn't an hour commute, and I wanted something that wasn't full-time and would allow me to be home with my kids as much as possible. I didn't anticipate that was going to be how I would feel after having children, but I really felt a pull to be there as much of the time as I could. And I mean, we all as PAs work really hard to see our patients, and I felt like if I was doing my best as a PA in clinical practice, that I was not doing my best as a mom, and vice versa. So I needed to find a way where I felt like I was being true to myself and true to my kids as well as my career. So I just started looking at non-clinical facets to use my knowledge, and it really started by following MDs who have taken a non-clinical path. And the first thing you always think of in a non-clinical realm is teaching, right? So I did start getting involved in the McMaster PA program, and I really enjoy my time there. I do that a couple times a week, and I sit in their rooms and help guide them to finding the solutions and right answers to their cases, and I have quite a good time with that. And then as you continue to look into more things, you find there's these other avenues of non-clinical paths for people with MD education, which would absolutely apply to a PA education as well. It's just that fewer of us have done it. Medical writing is one of those facets. In fact, I would say that I am one of the least educated in that profession. Most people either have their MD, PhD, multiple postdocs. They're very intelligent people who didn't want to be in a lab or in a clinical practice anymore. Another avenue is hospital administration. Another avenue is CROs, or clinical research organizations, and leading those, being a leader on developing clinical studies and leading trials. This is another non-clinical path that we can take. there are many options, or even within pharmaceutical companies as well, we have some options there. So I just looked at all of those and thought, which one of them really best fits me? And I never thought that writing would really fit me, but it has. It's provided me the lifestyle that I really want to have and need to have, excuse me. So I can work from home the majority of the time unless I'm covering a conference. I can bring my kids to school, I can pick them up from school, and I only work during the hours that they're away. So I can give my attention fully to them when they're around, and I give my attention fully to work when they're not around. And I also still get to interact with the elite of the medical profession and really enjoy my intellectual side as well.
And if someone were to be interested, a PA or PA student, to dive into medical writing, where would you recommend that they start?
Yeah, that's a hard spot. It's a hard spot. It's a very small profession, not unlike the PA profession, but there are even fewer medical writers. In fact, I believe from my personal anecdotal experience that most practicing clinicians have never even heard of medical writers and what they do. So it's a very small group of people, and the way I got into it is I just reached out to other medical writers. I found them on LinkedIn, I found them through podcasts, and I just asked for their advice, and that's how I got started. Then I would recommend joining the organizations. So AMWA is the American Medical Writers Association. They used to have a Canadian chapter, but that has dissolved, although they're still Canadian writers, and we're still a part of the AMWA. We're not an official chapter anymore, which just gets into the politics of running an organization. But they have a lot of resources. They post jobs. They also have the salary survey, which I find a lot of value in, because when you're coming to this from a side that you don't know what you should be charging somebody. I work as a freelance writer. You can also work as an employee. But what should you be expecting salary-wise? Is this appropriate to supplement the income that you are making in clinical practice? And, what are the nuances of working in that? AMWA has a lot of help with that, a lot of guidance with that. They also have some contract negotiating help and some training in that as well. An area of writing that I have not conquered, and I'm not sure if I ever will, is regulatory writing, which are the documents needed for submission to Health Canada, the FDA, the European equivalent as well for drug approval. And these are lengthy, very detailed documents that have a lot of rules and regulations. They have a course dedicated to teaching you that. So that would prepare you for getting jobs in that sense.
Fantastic. And because you're a freelancer and you're not working with the one company, how do you go about finding work?
Yeah, that's networking, and that's not so easy. I would say that if you are a good networker, you have an advantage over other writers. Most people who are drawn to writing are somewhat introverted. So if you're not so afraid to talk and meet with new people, you'll have an easier time finding jobs. These are not typically jobs that are posted. You can find jobs posted for medical writers, but these are generally an employee-based thing. Mm-hmm. I want to be part-time. I don't want to be an employee. So all the jobs I find are through networking.
Okay. So it sounds like you're involved in a lot of different realms outside of clinical practice. Mm-hmm. What do you enjoy the most about teaching and working with students?
I really like to see them learn. And actually, to be honest, I sometimes feel like I'm the one who's learning more than they are. They remind me of things I've forgotten. I'm learning new avenues and ways of expressing how to communicate, or not communicate, but how to enhance someone's current skills and abilities into finding the way to connect it to the medical knowledge and piece. I firmly believe that we all have an excellent skill base, and achieving this goal of being an excellent practitioner is all based on knowing and understanding what your skill base is and linking that to the ultimate goal. Okay, so PA Helpers is an online preparatory course to help people pass the Canadian PAC exam, and this is the only thing available in Canada to help PAs pass the exam. The U.S. system has a lot of organizations that can help PAs pass the exam. They have in-person classes, they have online classes, workbooks, etc. But there has been nothing in Canada. So if you are a PA in Canada looking for resources to prepare you for the exam, the obvious place to go is the U.S. because our exam is based off of theirs, but it's also a very inadequate source because it's U.S. units, U.S. guidelines, U.S. drug names. None of that is helpful for our exam. And although, yes, like your basic content is the same, but all those details are different. So studying off of that is a bit of a waste of time, in my opinion, and we had this huge gap here in Canada, and we needed to fill it. So Rachel Thompson and I are working very hard to get that done. It is out. We have finished, the students just took their exam yesterday, so they have just finished our first round of students in that. And we hope to continue to make improvements on that, and hope the students will continue to find some value in it. I hope to even take it to other countries that also don't have resources available to help them study for their national exams, but that's a future endeavor.
Where can people find more information about PA helpers?
We're at www.pahelpers.ca.
Mm-hmm.
You could also email me or Rachel, and we'd be happy to connect you that way as well. And you can find our links on LinkedIn. You can find, we're always posting on, the Facebook groups of the different Canadian PA groups, and as well as Instagram, kind of everywhere.
You also run the Meet the PAs podcast. Now, was that an idea that you had in conjunction with PA helpers, or was it a totally separate project?
It started probably out of working on PA helpers. We started working on the course and realized that we wanted to get to know the audience better and our target audience better, and then that bloomed into wanting to get to know the Canadian PA audience better. And we thought, we should get a podcast going. Everybody's got them. Rachel and I love podcasts. We listen to them every day on the ride to work and just our daily lives. We quite enjoy them. So we thought it would be a fun endeavor. So that is essentially a completely separate project, but they did coincide in when they occurred.
And can you list off a few names of people that you've interviewed?
Well, you are one of them, Anne.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
In fact,
yes.
You were the very first one.
Yes.
You're the very first one. We have a number of people that we've interviewed, and we're trying to get a greater spectrum of audience, because I would say the majority of people that we've interviewed are in Ontario. We recently interviewed Jana Malone, and her podcast episode will be released in a couple weeks. She's doing a lot of research, a lot of work in Ottawa, very inspiring to other PAs in the country. We have also interviewed Ian, the head of the University of Manitoba's PA program, and he has been really a founding member of the PA profession here, and he was even a founding member of the paramedic profession in Manitoba as well. So he has, throughout his entire career, been this person who wanted to instigate projects and move things forward. We also have an interview from a PA in Ghana, which is our first international interview. And that's just really interesting, because I feel like most of us are fairly unaware of what the day-to-day PA life is in other countries, especially countries that have a lifestyle that's so different from ours here in Canada. So that's very interesting. And in fact, they are currently on protest, all the PAs in Ghana, because they are waiting for a salary increase. They would like a livable wage, which they do not have. Mm-hmm. They have amazing autonomy, something that we would be very jealous of here in Canada, and they've been around since the 60s. But they don't get a living wage, which is really unacceptable for the amount of education they've had. So they're in the works of that. Lots of different things happening in the global PA realm that I feel like we should be aware of. And one of the things Rachel and I have a goal of is connecting this PA world, where there's not a lot of us in the globe. And we should be supporting each other, not just on a provincial or a national level in Canada, but also an international level. Let's connect each other. We can learn from each other, and we can bridge these gaps and become quite a strong force together.
What's a good way to get started in leadership and advocacy?
I really feel that we have the doors wide open here, and we are an amazing group of people. The more and more that I'm getting to know other PAs in this country, especially through the podcast, but as well through teaching, I am meeting really amazing people. And the great thing about it is that most of them don't know how amazing they are. They have these wonderful skills, and we have a profession in this country that needs recognition. So let's put us on the academic map, let's put us on the pharmacologic map, let's put us on the research map. We need ourselves, everybody has to take this on because we're a small group. We need to take leadership roles, and we have excellent leaders within our own organization, within the universities, within CAPA, we have excellent leaders. But we need to branch out, because if we only stay within ourselves, our profession won't continue to move up the ladder. We need to spread out. Contract research organizations are a great place. Mostly those jobs are reserved for PhDs and MDs, but there's no reason why a PA cannot lead it. Or even be the instead of the senior medical advisor, be the junior medical advisor, which is an excellent profession. We need leadership within the hospital setting as well. You know, I find it really interesting. We have a lot of leadership in hospitals that don't have any clinical experience, and this is providing a huge gap in our medical system. We can help close that, and we have leaders within this profession that don't know they're leaders yet that can fill these spots. And it certainly will take advocacy, and it won't be easy because there are lots of ceilings to break through, but I'm quite confident that we have the skills to do it.
Absolutely. So you named a couple of different ways that PAs can get involved. Leadership within hospitals, can you describe a few roles or examples of what that could look like?
Yeah, so like a director position I think is an excellent role. Director or manager positions are excellent roles for PAs. We as a profession are used to bridging the gap, right? We're often the communication between patients and physicians. We are often the communication between social work or psychiatry and general practitioners. We are used to bridging the gaps. We see patients, and we don't just come at it from the medical role, but we also have to come at it from the nursing role, where, you know, you go to a nursing home, a hospital setting, or a home setting, and we often will be helping change patients or clean them, in addition to doing the actual medical activity that we're there for. So we are used to melding all these pots together, which is why we would be an excellent role leader as a manager or a director in different hospital settings. So directors tend to have multiple departments that they're in charge of, and that varies from hospital to hospital. But if you really know the emergency room, why would that not be an excellent role for you? It would. And oftentimes those roles are left for people who don't have clinical hands-on experience. And part of that is because people who work in clinical practice often don't have experience or desire to move to the administrative track. But it's also because we have this idea here that they should be separate, which is really the opposite of what effective leadership means.
So in my experience, when I was trying to get hospital privileges, I noticed that a lot of the leadership roles, like Director of Surgical Services, et cetera, were filled by nurses with MBAs or a Master's in Public Health. Now, are Master's programs a requirement to go into administration?
Well, they're not a requirement, but obviously each hospital is going to have their preference. And currently, right now, frequently the preference is going to be somebody who has a Master's or a PhD or an MD. And there is a master's program in Canada for PAs, but most of the programs in Canada are not currently master's programs. So that will potentially be a gap. There could be hospital administration that refuses to even consider your candidacy without that further education. But I think that is something we really have to work on. I think we should focus on moving ourselves up the ladder even within our clinical practice. It can start even from smaller things like initiating a research project, getting your physicians on board with that, and then learning the process of starting through with that. Making sure that you're communicating well with the board of the hospital, because if they know who you are, then you're more likely to continue moving up the ladder and expanding that resume. Take leadership roles within creating different directives and guidelines at the hospital. Although that may be attributed to the person who has a master's in public health, there's no reason why you can't be a part of that. And the more that you make yourself a part of something, the more likely you are to continue moving up that ladder.
And is that a journey that you have personally taken in your clinical roles?
I would say no. Not until recently. To be quite honest, I spent my early years very much focused on learning and feeling like I couldn't do that. I did eventually start to move up. I started to have meetings at the hospitals with especially the Nurses Association, trying to bridge the gap and trying to make sure that we had good working relationships, because in 2010 it was very challenging to have good working relationships, and I think we're making progress with that, and people need to get to know us more. So I did do that. I did hold lots of meetings with that. I didn't initiate research projects though, and I didn't go really above and beyond outside of my oncology unit. And I would change that if I could go back. I would. At this point, I do feel like I'm taking a leadership role and I'm creating that environment for myself, although it's not in a hospital setting anymore. I am moving down that track, and I am trying to do that. I may not have every skill set that everybody wants, but I certainly have many that I can bring to the table. And I truly believe that about everybody. And if we have that diversity that is pushing and moving things forward, we can do that as a whole group.
And I find it interesting that a lot of the experienced PAs that I talk to, the first few years are dedicated to improving your clinical practice, showing up as a great PA, being there for your patients. And then after a few years, we're sort of looking for other ways to grow and professionally develop. So some get involved with quality improvement projects, some get on the boards of hospitals, others start sort of their own personal projects outside of clinical practice, like the way that you have. So there's a lot of diversity and opportunities to really grow as a person, a professional, and sort of impact your community, whatever way you decide to do it in your own way. And I feel like the way that you do it with the podcast with PA Helpers, you're inspiring a future generation of PAs. A lot of pre-PAs that I talk to use your podcast as actually preparation.
Really? I'm
to
so
prepare
glad to
and
hear
learn
that.
the background and the context of everything, because to hear it from practicing PAs, and you're so good at drawing great answers, and I think being an interviewer is a skill, and you're very, very good at doing that.
Oh, and that means a lot. Thank you so much. I really do hope that it's making a difference. I hope people listen. It is a passion project, and I hope that Rachel and I are sitting behind the microphone inspiring future PA leaders.
Yeah, I'm pretty much used to your voices now, so it's so great. Now, you have experience working, at least exposure to PAs in Canada versus PAs in the U.S. If you were to describe what a PA is, would you say that your elevator pitch or your definition would be essentially the same, or are there certain differences, you think?
No, I would make basically the same elevator pitch, and honestly, my elevator pitch is very different from a lot of people's. I'm very apolitical with it. If people here in Canada know what a nurse practitioner is, so I often say, oh no, I'm a physician assistant. It's kind of in between a nurse and a doctor. I see patients, I prescribe medications. It's very similar to a nurse practitioner. And I suppose that's where my colleagues would diverge from me, because they don't often like that comparison. But in my opinion, we have to scrap those politics. I think they're very bad for our professions individually, and I think it's very bad for our medical system as a whole. I think that most jobs could be posted for either a PA or an NP. Patients do not know the difference between us. A lot of physicians don't know the difference between us, and hospital staff and administration often don't know the difference between us. Just because our role to getting to just because our educational paths were different, we ended up in very similar places. And yes, there are minute differences, and yes, there are political differences, but ultimately, if we can appreciate our similarities, if we can come together on our similarities, we can appreciate our differences. And right now, we're not, as our organizations, coming together on our similarities. And I view that as a very big hindrance to our professional goals, as well as our medical advocacy as a whole. Even jobs in the States, a lot of jobs are be posted for either PA or NP. I mean, you can still find the political realm of people wanting the differences, but it's certainly much more overlapping in the States than here. One of the things that I was really taken by when I first moved to Canada was the aggressive nature of our organizations. I felt like our professions were very against each other, really butting heads, in fact, still are. And I just really feel very strongly that that's not a path we should focus on.
Plenty of work to go around, and we really should be working together. We're members of a team.
Exactly.
And you're not going to win if you try to make yourself better than somebody else. We're all part of a team, and we all care, and our purpose is for our patient.
We all have the same goal. Exactly. And there's enough work to go around.
There is enough work to go around. In your opinion, what is an ideal PA?
It is less to do with intelligence and much more to do with the ability to talk to patients and the ability to understand our strengths and our weaknesses. I think a good PA is able to come into a practice and integrate themselves so wholeheartedly that the practice doesn't know what they do without you. And most of us are able to achieve that, and research supports that PAs, although most of the research is from the States, it is still supported here in Canada as well. PAs come into a practice and they're able to integrate themselves in a way that patients know their name, and you know the patient's name. Doctors don't know what they do without you, and the admin staff appreciate your efforts. So to me, a good PA really does that. A good PA continues with their learning process, looks at the new things coming out, finds gaps that no one else knew were there, and is able to find ways to fill them, come up with ideas, and really be an integrated person in the healthcare system.
And what do you love about being a PA? Or when you were doing your clinical practice, what were some of the things that really fulfilled you when you went to work?
Yeah, it was patience. I mean, I think that's got to be it for all of us, right? It's patience. I have been at the bedside of many people when they died, and I actually really appreciated it. Mm-hmm. I felt so blessed and so lucky that I was allowed into a space that was so personal and very private and vulnerable. And I was not only allowed but welcomed into that space with patients and their families. There's hope in death, although as a society and culture we don't acknowledge that, or we can't find that, but there is hope in death. It may not be life, but there is hope in death. And it's a beautiful process that is inevitable for all of us. So being at their bedside it was just inexplainable for me. And there are certain people that I'll never forget. There are families that I'll never forget. They had an impact on me and impacted how I viewed the world and how I approached it. Mm-hmm. So and I think most of us would feel that patients were the ultimate reward.
Yeah, and I think it especially makes you look back on your own life and sort of makes you evaluate the way that you're living it, how you're doing it purposefully, intentionally. What made you decide to become a PA?
I always knew that I wanted to be in medicine somehow, and so in my high school years there was a program for students who were academically doing well enough that the school would pay for some college education. So I became a nurse in high school, and I was working as a nurse at a 2-year nurse at the age of 16 in a nursing. I started in a nursing home, and then I moved into internal medicine. So I always knew that, the medical realm was for me. That was never a question, but it was a question of where in that medical realm do I want to be. I knew pretty much right away that a physician was not for me. I felt like that role is so independent that it was scary. The other thing is that I knew that I didn't want my work to take over my life. I wanted to enjoy my work, but I also wanted time to enjoy outside of work. And I felt like a lot of physicians that I knew, anecdotally, had a very difficult time with that. And even at the time, back in 20 years ago, there was still evidence showing that physicians have higher suicide rates, high depression rates, and struggled within the amount of workload that was happening, and lots of things were changing. So I knew I didn't want to be that person. So then it came down to nurse practitioner or PA. And I could have gone the nurse practitioner route. I certainly was kind of already on that track. But what made me decide a PA over an NP in the U.S., mind you, this is in the U.S., is that I wanted to understand. So the nursing route took this really empathic, whole person perspective, which is a beautiful thing, and we certainly can't lose that. That's important for everyone in the system. But the piece that I really wanted was the research piece and the science piece. So that's how I ended up deciding as a PA, because the prerequisites really fell in that category. But to fulfill the empathic side of myself, I also minored in medical ethics. So I majored in biology and chemistry and minored in medical ethics, and spent quite a bit of time on my thesis of ethics because it fulfilled that nursing piece of me that was maybe missing. So I was able to get all the details of the research as well as the biochemistry of what was happening in the body. And that's really how I decided. I even got to do some research in undergrad. That was my first time being published. Was I 20? I think I was about 20 years old. My first publication had nothing to do with medicine. It was on hermaphroditic snail activity and how they decide who becomes the male and who acts as the female during copulation. So that was my very first exposure to research. I traveled the U.S. presenting my research, and it was really an interesting, fun experience in life, and it continued. I guess it kind of connects me to now because I'm still very involved in research today, but it fulfilled that need of my comprehension and research piece. So PA school it was.
Do you have any advice for first or second year students about how to succeed and do well?
It's tough. I mean, it's really tough. I don't wish to be back in school. I feel for the people who are in school because it is a tough process and it is very heavy. I think one thing you have to remember is that it's only 2 years to take a breath. Usually people find that either the first year or the second year is harder for them. They like the more academic stuff where they're in the books, or they like to be with the patients. And so one of those will be slightly easier than the other for you, or slightly more fulfilling than the other. And most people would pick the second year where you're actually seeing patients. And it's still challenging and you're still working a lot, but it's a little bit more fulfilling, so it's easier to do day after day. And I think you got to find camaraderie, find that friendship, and don't reinvent the wheel. Like if someone already understands something better than you, ask them to help you pick it up, because that is the whole point, is teamwork anyway. And the other thing is that it's, you just have to focus. You just have to really focus and eliminate as much other activity in your life as possible. Don't keep a job. Do a job in undergrad, but when you're in PA school, that's just not really feasible, and you're going to put so much stress on yourself, it's not worth it. And then also have a plan. What is your day-to-day plan to make sure you get the studying in that you need to get done?
Mm-hmm. And I know our new grads are actually on the cusp of applying for jobs. Do you have any advice for them?
Well, there's the New Start grants in Ontario, which is very helpful. And the rest of everybody else, including the New Start people, I think one of the things you want to look for is a long-term position. And so I would ask that in the job interviews. The other thing that I would be paying attention to is the workload. How many patients are you going to be expected to see a day or per hour? And the other thing is if you will be given any administration time, because the charting and the paperwork piles up more than you realize before you take your first job. And it's very helpful if into your initial contract you can get half a day or a day dedicated to getting that done. Otherwise, you're going to end up taking it home and doing it on hours you're not paid for. Those would be, I think, the things that I would look for to help you make sure that you get a job you like. In terms of just finding available jobs, that's networking. It really is networking. And you've said this, Anne, on your blog. We've repeated it many times. The leaders of our programs in the country also say this again and again. The key is advocacy for yourself and networking. And one of the things within self-advocacy is to make sure that you're not just going out saying, I'm looking for a job. You have to go out and make yourself useful to somebody else for nothing in return. And that's what's going to make people start to go, okay, you're actually a very vigilant person. You're somebody that I want my practice to be associated with. And then they will start to create the job openings for you once you meet those right people. So how do you advocate for yourself? Then that would be, I guess, the next conundrum is how do you do that? The first place to start are the places you rotated. Where's the best experience you had, where you had the best connection with the physicians or the best connection with the administrative staff? And go back and ask how they're doing. Even before you finish the rotation, you can ask if they have any interest and let them know that, there are resources out there to help them get funding and to help them get approval. So that's the first place to start. If that doesn't work for you, I think the next place to start is anyone else you know. So if you have friends of the family that are physicians or work in hospitals, it might not just be asking them for a job. It might just be saying, do you know anybody looking? Or is there something I could do that would help? Anything. If you can, the other thing is conferences. If you can invest in the conference and go to either a conference or a CME locally, they don't have to be big, expensive ones. Just the local ones. You're going to increase your knowledge and you can network. You can go around. People are there to network. That's why people are there. They're there for the CME and to meet other people. So that, and you can I think you will find a job through doing all of that.
That's very interesting that you say that, because I reached out to a doctor in Toronto because I was interested in getting some more exposure to some community physiatry. I was not looking for a job. I explained what I was and that, through a cousin that had known, that was also a physiatrist but had just started working, so he didn't have his practice. Just the act of reaching out and saying, like, I don't really have any ulterior motives. I just want exposure to medicine. I heard your practice is really great. Would you mind like a half day? Let me know what would go. And then he started talking to me about job opportunities and this idea of working with a PA. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. I'm not looking currently. So it was a really interesting way, because I think it's very different when you sort of show your proof rather than having this big ask and sort of expecting,
Right.
It's not entitlement, I would say. It's a very different way to have conversations and to sell yourself. Like, rather than, going in and being like, I need this salary, this, and this, these are my work duties. Right. It's having conversations, creating value, and building relationships. And I think that that's what networking is. It
is, exactly. People don't want you to sell yourself. They just want to know who you are.
Yeah.
And through getting to know who you are, you will find the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that seems to be a way that we both function. So that's great.
Exactly. Well, that's how you got your job, right? It's
exactly
through just connecting with another physician that you met through rotation, I believe,
Yeah, through rotations.
But that's how you connected, and then you were able to solidify a long-term position for yourself. You have continued throughout your advocacy for PAs in this country, meeting other people and showing them genuinely who you are. Not that you're asking anything in return. You're just genuinely interested in who they are as a person, which shows who you are as a person.
Preaching to the choir.
There we go.
There we go.
I'm really excited about the journal. Ian Jones started the journal, so he's the director of the PA program in Manitoba, and it is currently sponsored by the University of Manitoba. But it's an open access journal. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means that you don't have to pay to see it, which is really a big point of contention. It's a source of a lot of debate in the journalistic world, because if you have to pay for access to information, are we doing ourselves a service, or are we limiting and creating a hierarchy of medicine through that act? So open access is the way to go at this point, in my opinion. It needs to be free and available to all. So it is open access. It's free to all our users. You can find it, you can search JCAN PA, or you can also go to the University of Manitoba's website. And I'm sure you can list all these on the...
Of course, show notes, yeah.
And it is a start to a really great platform for the academic side of physician assistants in this country. And actually, we are doing more than we think we're doing. And it feels a little bit scary to move into that realm of academia and, can I publish journals and can I do research and how do I do that? But this provides that platform, and it's certainly a start. I believe it's going to legitimize the PA profession in Canada and put us on the academic map. Because right now, it's easy for us to feel like we're less than. We're not the MD. So are we less than? No, we're not less than. In fact, we're quite an intelligent group of people, and we can achieve great things if we have the resources put in front of us to do so, just like anyone else. So physicians have a lot of resources put in front of them to do research and to create these things, and they have many platforms for this. This is the first platform for physician assistants in Canada, and we've had a lot of good access thus far. We've had one publication last summer, and in the summer of 2018, and our next publication will be January 2019. So we're twice a year publication right now. It's really easy to do. We welcome anybody to come. In fact, I really want you to come. If you don't feel like you can do research, write an opinion piece. Just say, if you want to rant about an issue that you're having, send it in. There's letters. You can do a letter to the editor, which is just a few hundred words and is short. The other thing is, Ian and I, as well as the other editors on the team, are happy to walk you through the process. We're here to help you do that, and I'm happy to help people like really deeply and severely edit a piece. If they can get something basic together, I can help move it to the final stages. We have a peer review process, which is, of course, we have a peer review process, of course, which is required for anybody who wants to have any kind of legitimate research put out there. So a peer review process generally requires at least 3 peer reviewers. A peer reviewer in this case would be a PA. Generally, we like to have reviewers who are in that field. So if you're writing a piece on cardiology, then it's another PA cardiologist reviewing. We're not quite there because we need more reviewers, which...
Yes, please come.
It doesn't take much to be a reviewer. It certainly is a volunteer position, but I would say it takes a couple hours of your time per year. So it's not a huge time commitment.
Okay, and do you have to be a PA to contribute to this?
No, you don't. In fact, we would love other people who aren't PAs. I have physicians who are interested in publishing with us, and also politicians. We'd love to get a few more politicians on board, sending in their piece about what they think PA should move towards and how they appreciate us. We don't want any negativity. That's a joke. If you send something negative, I'll still consider it. But it's not. You don't have to be a PA, no. But the focus is Canadian PAs, so whatever you write needs to be towards that focus.
Okay, great. And are you enjoying the conference so far?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I have a great time at the conference. I love Victoria. I've never been here before. It's quite a beautiful place, and being on the water and lots of gardens. I'm thinking about my own garden at home. If we lived here, the garden could continue. It's a beautiful place. I'm loving the conference. I love to meet new people, so I'm enjoying the networking.
Yeah, and would you encourage other PAs to attend the conference? Like, what value do you think they get out of it?
Well, of course, there's the CME value, right? Which, obviously has to be put as number one. You want your CME credits when you come. But I think it's more than that. I feel that we can end up feeling really isolated as a PA in this country because there's not many of us. So whatever issue you may be having, there's going to be someone else here who's had it, someone else who has advice. every single conference, the founding members of the PA profession in this country, they're at, and they are always encouraging. They always keep you on the straight and narrow and give you advice, get you hope and back on track. And even if you're not having issues, you can maybe provide hope to somebody else. And of course, we're all really interesting lot anyway, so you should just...
We are very interesting people. I would agree.
You should come out, yeah.
Where can people find you? What's the best way to get the hold of you?
I'm at LinkedIn. I'm Rebecca Mueller, and my LinkedIn profile will link in the show notes. And I always respond to my LinkedIn messages quickly. I also always quickly respond to email, which is rlmwriting, WRTING, @gmail.com. And I also always respond on the Facebook posts from the different groups. I think I'm a member of most of the groups, if not every group. And I do my best. If someone mentions me, I will respond. If they don't mention me, I try to comment on whatever posts I can comment on and help other PAs around.
That's good. I feel like we have a lot in common in terms of our presence on social media and our personal missions to sort of speak with PAs and learn about them.
I agree, and we're like meant to be friends. That's how it works.
Yeah.